Welcome everyone to this section on using emails with Python. So in this section, we're going to be exploring how to send emails with Python and how to check our inbox for received messages. Please keep in mind that this process is actually highly reliant on your administrative privileges on both your local computer, your internet, and your email. So it's highly likely that if you're running this on a corporate network or a work computer, or if you're trying to use a work email that you don't have full admin permissions for, these methods are going to be blocked by your company for security reasons. And if you encounter those sort of issues because of either a corporate network, work computer, or work email, please contact your IT department because that's not really an issue you can really work around easily with code because essentially you're trying to then hack into your own email. So instead, contact your IT department. Now, lastly, there's actually no full exercise for these lecture topics. We'll simply cover how to send out email with Python automatically and how to check your inbox for messages from Python. And because of this, there's no real way we can actually create a true self-assessment for things that involve your personal email address. But we do have a notebook that's called an exercise notebook, which is really just a list of ideas for you to explore. And we encourage you to get creative, given what you've already learned so far with Python, and combine that with the ability to send and receive email programmatically. Okay, let's get started. I'll see you at the next lecture. Welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to explore sending emails with Python. To send emails with Python, we actually have to go through a lot of steps. We have to connect to what's known as an email server, confirm that connection, set up a communication protocol, log into your actual email account, and then send the message. Now, fortunately, the built-in smtplib library that's already in Python makes these steps just really simple function calls. So essentially just making sure that you call the function from the smtplib library in the correct order. So you might be wondering, what is SMTP? Well, each major email provider has their own simple mail transfer protocol server. And it's essentially a domain name that you connect to when you're trying to access your email programmatically. And since Gmail is the most popular email hosting service at this time, what we're going to do is walk you through how to connect to Gmail. So we'll be using that Gmail domain name. So we'll go over this process with a Gmail account. Now, something that's special with Gmail is for Gmail users, because of security things that have to do that are built into a Gmail account, you're going to need to generate what's known as an app password instead of your normal password. And this is essentially not the password you use to log in onto your email from just any computer. Instead, what's going to happen is we'll create a specialized app password, and that's basically telling Gmail, hey, you have a special application somewhere out there in the world, and it's going to connect to your Gmail account through this separate password. That way, in case this application gets compromised somehow, that password that you originally used is not compromised. So you're able to create a special app password just for your Python script, and it also lets Gmail know that, hey, you're specifically authorizing this other application, our Python script, to actually access your account. Okay, so let's explore this entire process. We'll begin by importing the SMTP, that's a Simple Mail Transfer Protocol library, so SMTP-lib. And then what we're going to do is create an SMTP object for a server. And you can look at the table in the corresponding notebook for your server domain name, but we'll be using Gmail as our server. So we'll say SMTP object is equal to SMTP-lib, and we'll call SMTP function off of this, and then we'll provide the actual domain server, which is smtp.gmail.com. And then for Gmail, we can also provide a port number. So we'll try 587. If for some reason the number 587 doesn't work, and when you try using this and running this, you get back some sort of error, something else you can try is using the port number 465. If that also doesn't work, you can try not passing in any number for the port number. Keep in mind, if you have a firewall or antivirus, that may prevent your Python script from trying to reach out and connect over the internet. The next step we need to do is run an ehlo method command, which greets the server and establishes the connection. This method call should be done directly after creating the object, so make sure you follow these steps exactly. Calling it after other methods will basically result in errors in connecting later on. So right after you create the object, the very next line should be running this ehlo. So we'll say grab our object and run ehlo, which essentially greets the server. And when you run this, you should see some sort of code that starts with 250, and this basically says that we had a successful connection. Now, when using the port 587, this means you're using TLS encryption. So basically, all email as you send it is encrypted. That way, people can't read your emails without being the actual recipient. And in order to actually initiate this sort of encryption, we're going to grab our object again, SMTP object, and then we'll call the method start TLS. If you ended up using the port 465, you can basically skip this step because that means you're using SSL. Okay, you should have gotten a code 220 and it says ready to start TLS. Now it's time to set up the email and the passwords. Keep in mind, you should never save the raw string of your password or email in a script, because basically that means that anyone that sees this script will be able to then see your email and password. Instead, what you should do is try using the input function to get that information. If you don't want your password to be visible when you're typing it in, you can also use the built-in getPass library that will hide your password as you type it in. To further explain what we mean by this, let's imagine we use the input function to save a password. So we will say, what is your password? And let's say we're going to save this to some variable called password. If we were to run this, if I were to type my password here, it would be visible to the user. So whatever I type here, someone's going to be able to see it if they're watching my computer. Now, a better way of doing this is say import getPass, and then once you've done that, we'll say password is equal to, and you'll run getPass.getPass, and you should be saving this to a variable. And then we can provide password, please. And then if we run this and we start typing something, you'll notice that it's invisible. And you can type a really long password here, and even after you run it, it won't really indicate how long your password was. So this is a secure way to pass in information for people that are viewing your computer directly. So just in case that happens, you should be using the getPass instead of just a simple input. It really depends on how secure you want your script to be or your notebook to be, but what you should never do is just save your password as a variable directly. So you should never just do something like this, password, and then say, password 123. That's pretty insecure and pretty dangerous, so you may end up losing your password that way. Okay, now let's go over a second step, and this is specifically for Gmail users, where we need to generate an app password instead of our normal email password. And this also requires enabling two-step authentication. So there's a link in the notebook that you can follow as far as the instructions to set up two-step factor authentication as well as the app password. So let's go to that link right now. So if you go to that link, it will take you to sign in using app passwords. And it will say right here, if you use two-step verification, so click on that two-step verification link, and we need to turn on two-step verification. So this is actually quite simple. Just go to the two-step verification page here. You might have to sign into your Google account, select Get Started, and then follow the step-by-step process. So if you click here on two-step verification, it'll say protect your account with two-step verification, and I actually recommend doing this anyways, even if you don't intend to use Python for your email, because it's just safer for your email address. So click Get Started. Once you've signed in, you should see something that looks like this, and that basically sets up your phone number as the second factor of authentication. So you're going to need to do this if you want to be able to send and receive emails with Python on a Gmail account. So you'll go ahead and type in the phone number that you want to use, and they'll confirm you with either a text message or a phone call, and you'll go through those steps, and then you'll have two-step verification ready to go. If you already have two-step verification, you won't actually see this pop up. Instead, it'll just take you to your securities page in Gmail, and that basically indicates that you're actually ready to go. You already had two-step verification. So you can confirm that if you've ever received some sort of security code on your phone from Gmail. So that's setting up two-step verification. Once you've done that, we'll be able to set up our app password. So let's go back to that link. And this is the link to sign in using app passwords. So we'll scroll down here, and we're going to now generate an app password. We'll open this, and we'll click this app passwords page, and there's some instructions here on how to generate them. Go ahead and click on App Passwords. If you get this result here, it means that you have not set up two-factor authentication, and you need to go back and do that. So let's go ahead and show you what it looks like when you have set up two-factor authentication. With two-step verification authorized, you'll have this app passwords page. You'll go ahead and select an app. In this case, we want to use our Mail app. So that's the app we want to interact with, and we can select a device. We will select our custom name, and this will just be something like script, Python, or really whatever you want to call it, just something memorable so you can understand why you generated this app password. Then hit generate, and it will generate an app password for you. So you will copy this and save it somewhere on your computer because that's the password we're going to be using for our actual login. So we'll come back here to our notebook and let's actually set up our email. So we'll show you how to use getPass just to remind you. We'll say getPass, email. We will say password is equal to getPass.getPass password. And then finally, we will say SMTP object. We'll call the login method from that email and password. So we're going to run this. So go ahead and type in your email address. In this case, I'm typing in a Gmail address. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in that app password. So again, this is not your normal Gmail password. This is the app password. So once you've done that, you should see a code indicating that it was accepted. Now we're able to send email. Keep in mind, if you stop right here, walk away from your computer for a few hours, and then come back, you may be disconnected just because it took so long. So keep that in mind. You're going to want to, if you're in the notebook setting, do all your sending of your email immediately after logging in. Otherwise, you may get disconnected and you'll have to regenerate another app password. So we can basically send an email. We're going to need a couple of things. We'll need a from address. So we need to indicate where the actual email is coming from. This is going just to be your email again. So we'll say from address is equal to my email. We need a to address, and that's going to be the email address that you want to send it to. So that's the email of your recipient. I will send myself an email here. And then the subject line. So we'll have that be an input. So enter the subject line, and then we'll have the actual body or message. We can also have that be input. Enter the body, message, and then the way the message is constructed is it has to be subject, colon, space, then the actual subject itself, and then a new line, and that indicates that the subject has stopped, and then you paste in the rest of the message. Because the way this actual function is going to work is it's going to accept one giant string to indicate both the subject and the message body. And in order to differentiate between the subject and the message, it needs this sort of format. Subject, colon, space, then the actual subject title, and then a new line, and then the rest of your message. So once you've done that, you'll say SMTP object. You'll call the send mail method off of this, and then you'll pass in your from address, your to address, so that's the address you're sending to, and then the actual string message. So I'm sending right now an address for myself to myself. I recommend you just do the same, that way you can quickly check it once you log in. But let's run this. We'll enter the subject line, and let's just enter subject new test Python, whatever really you want, and then enter the body message, hello, this is a test, or again, whatever you want to send. Run that, and right now it's sending it. If you get back an empty dictionary, that means the sending was successful. So you should get something like this back. If you're getting an error, it's most likely having to do with either your connection up here or your actual email and password combination. Once you've been able to do that, you'll want to quit and close your session. So you will say SMTP object.quit, and that will now close my connection. Let's log in using our browser to see if we've received the message, and then later on we'll see how we could do that same sort of functionality with Python. So I'm going to now go to my Gmail inbox. And in my Gmail inbox, I can see sent 0 minutes ago is a message from myself. So blind carbon copy me. Hello, this is a test, and the title is New Test Python. Looks like it was all successful. Excellent work so far. We'll see you in the next lesson where we discuss how to do this sort of checking automatically with Python. Welcome back, everyone. In this lecture, we're going to discuss receiving emails with Python. And when we talk about receiving, really what we're talking about is being able to explore your inbox with Python. To view received emails with Python, we can use the built-in IMAP-lib and email libraries in Python. So that's actually two separate libraries names. That's IMAP-lib is one library, and then there's actually an email library just called email in Python. And what the IMAP-lib library allows you to do is use its special syntax for searching your inbox. And this is essentially the same kind of things you can search for by going to just a normal computer and searching your inbox. So what I mean by that is if you take a look at this table, and this table is inside the lecture notebook, you essentially have special syntax keywords and then a corresponding definition for them. So what this allows you to do is search for specific things from your email folder. So for example, if you were just to use the keyword all, that would attempt to return all the messages from your email folder or your email inbox. And there are usually size limits to this. So if you want to change them, you can begin actually editing the attributes to the IMAP library. And usually it's 100 is going to be the limit. However, you can change that to really any number you want, but you should be careful with all because that's just grabbing everything. Usually, however, you're going to be filtering things by things like dates. So you can say, get all the messages before a date or on a date or since a date, or do things like retrieve all messages from a particular user or email address, or all the messages that went to an email address using the to keyword. And then you can also check things based off who was CC'd, who was blind carbon copied, or you can do things like check for the subject, the body text, or whether or not you've answered it, have seen it, deleted it, or not deleted it, and so on. So lots of keywords here, basically all the things you would expect to be able to filter by. Now before beginning this discussion, what I would like you to do is go ahead and send yourself a test email with a very unique subject line that doesn't actually correspond to any other email in your inbox. So just basically choose a random color, maybe a random animal or something very unique that you know would only be returned by this particular email. Because what we're going to do is use this as a test email in order to retrieve it with Python. So we want to make sure this works, so don't send yourself just a generic email, otherwise we'll probably grab too many. So let's begin exploring checking received emails with Python. Let's hop to a notebook. The first thing we're going to do is import the IMAP lib library that's built into Python, and we'll create an instance of it. And you can call this variable whatever you want, but a lot of times people call it a capital M. And we'll say IMAP lib, and then call IMAP for SSL, and then we'll pass in the IMAP server for Gmail, which is imap.gmail.com. And then we need to grab our password and email. So to do that, you can either use input or get pass. We'll say that our email is equal to get pass, email, and then we'll also grab our actual password for the email, get pass. And remember, for Gmail users, this is your app password. So let's run this. We'll go ahead and enter your email for whatever you happen to be using. And then you can also put in your password. In this case, I'm putting in the app password. Let's now connect. We can say m.login, and we'll pass in email and password. Run that, and you should be able to log in, and you should see some sort of authenticated success message there. Once you've done that, you'll be able to type in m.list as a method, run that, and you can see everything that you can check in your particular email. Typically, you'll be checking your inbox, but you can also see you can check personal, receipts, sent, trash, things labeled travel or work, drafts, important, sent mail, spam, starred, trash. So there's lots of different options, different flags that Gmail or other email providers have for you. We're going to select the most common one, which is your inbox, meaning we'll say M, select, and we'll pass in inbox. Run that, and then it should say OK and some sort of connection number to your inbox. Your number will likely be different than mine here. And then now that we've connected to our mail, we're going to be able to search for it using the specialized syntax of IMAP. Now the next step after we've logged in is to actually search our inbox. And this is the sort of syntax you can use to specify what messages you're looking for. In our case, we will attempt to search for that email that we just sent earlier that was a subject line, new test Python. So we say type and data, basically doing tuple unpacking, because the actual search function that we call is going to return a tuple. And you pass in none as the first argument, and then the second argument is the actual string that uses this sort of code. So you can say, for instance, before, and then format a date, such as 01 November 2000, and this will essentially search all your email and return back everything sent before 01 November 2000. Or you could do on a certain date or since a certain date. You can do from a certain string. So for example, you could say from user at example.com, and maybe you didn't know who the actual user was at this example.com. The other thing you could say is just from example, and it will search for all the email addresses from and see if the string example is in there. The other thing you can do that we're going to be doing is search by subject. So notice how these keywords are capitalized. We'll say subject, and then inside of this string we'll have another substring, and this will be the actual string we're checking for. So the subject line that we passed in last time was new test Python. So that's what we're going to be searching here. Notice how it's a string inside of a string. And let's run this and see what we get. If you select type, it should say OK. And if you have data, it should have some sort of number. If you don't have any sort of number returned here, it means it didn't find any messages. If you have multiple numbers here in a list, it means it found more than one message that relates to whatever search term you were looking for. So this unique ID is the ID that references the actual email. We don't have the email itself yet. To do that, we now need to fetch the actual data. So if we take a look at the first item in this list, it's this unique ID. So we will say ID is equal to, we'll say email ID. Email ID is equal to that item in the list, and then we'll say result, email underscore data is equal to M, and then we end up fetching that particular email ID. And then for a second argument, we need to pass in a protocol. And the protocol for that is a string with parentheses RFC822. Now that we've actually fetched the email data, we can take a look at this email data. And it's basically going to be a bit of a sloppy mess. There's lots of information here, the emails, but if you take a look down here, we can see that we have the subject and we actually have the message we sent. Hello, this is a test. And this is all within a list, within some tuples. So we just want to grab the actual message itself. So what we're going to do is index for it. We'll type out raw email is equal to email data, and its index position, you may need to play around for this, but in our case it's at 01. So that's the raw email itself, and we want the raw email string. We'll type out raw email string is equal to this raw email, and we're going to need to decode it. And the reason for that is because there may be symbols such as the @ symbol, which is confusing to Python sometimes. So we want to clarify that we're going to decode it with UTF-8 encoding. And then once we've done that, we can use the built-in email library to help parse that string. We will import email, and this email library helps grab the actual message from a string. And the syntax is still a bit strange, but it looks like this. You say email message, and then from the email that we just imported, we'll type out message from. And in this case, we're grabbing the message from a string, and then we pass in that raw email string that we just created. And then once we've done that, we need to do the following. The actual email message object here, if we take a look at it, it's this iterator. And what we need to do is say for every part in the email message dot walk, so you can kind of walk through this email message object, if part dot get content type is equal to text/plain, then body is equal to part dot get payload, and say decode is equal to true, and then print the body. Now this is quite complicated, but the reason this is complicated is because we're basically going from that raw string email message and trying to get rid of all the other information that came in through the email data. There's lots of different ways you could decide to look through the subject once you have this actual email data yourself. It's optional to use this email library. Sometimes people feel that it's more of a hassle to use this email library and they'd rather make their own custom script to grab the email data. And if you're dealing with emails that look the same every time, maybe it's from some API service, it might make sense to not use this actual email library that's built in. But if you do want to use this email library that's built in, once you have the raw email string from your actual email data, after you've decoded it, you type out email message from string, and then you say for part and email message walk. If the part get content type, which basically asks, hey, what is the content type of the part? And if it's equal to text/plain, meaning it's plain text, you grab the payload of that part, decoding it, and then that's the actual variable that we want to see. So if we print this out, we should be able to see the actual body of the message, which is, hello, this is a test. And this B indicates that it's a byte string, just because of the way we read in that email data. Keep in mind, this sort of content type check, text/plain, that's if you only expect just plain text. What you could also do is maybe expect text/HTML, and that's really common if someone has provided a link inside of the email. So if you expect another link to be in the email that was sent to you, you may want to check for text/HTML instead of text/plain. Okay, that's it for the basics of checking your received email with Python. Let's quickly go over all the steps. All you have to do is import IMAP_lib, make the connection to your IMAP server, so it's imap.gmail.com or imap.yahoo.com, depending on what your actual domain provider is. Then grab your email and password, log in. You can see a list of options, but typically you'll be searching your inbox, and then using the special syntax code, you search for whatever you're looking for, whether it's a particular subject, whether it's a particular email that it's from, a date that it was sent on. You get back the type and data, and the data, recall, is just a list of actual email IDs. Once you have those email IDs, you need to fetch them. And here we're fetching a singular email ID, and we pass in this protocol for fetching it. And then we have the email data, and it's kind of up to you what you want to do at that point because it's a bit of a mess, but one way you can deal with it is using this email library and then using this walk functionality to check for particular content types. All right, that's it. Thank you, and I'll see you at the next lecture.